welcome to this special hour of the Law and Crime Network, live from Moscow, Idaho. I'm Anjanette Levy, and for the next hour, we will be taking your questions live, and we want to hear from you. We want to answer any question you have about this case and the 4 homicides that took place nearly a month ago here in Moscow, Idaho. So post those questions on Law and Crime's Twitter page, Facebook, in our YouTube chat. We are, of course, streaming on YouTube, also on Twitch, and we will get those questions answered for you to the best of our abilities. So right now, we have a great panel of experts with me for the next hour. Joseph Scott Morgan is a forensic death investigator, and Imran Ansari is a host here at Law and Crime and also an attorney. Thanks to both of you for being with us today. The big news that we begin with is the fact that Moscow police just yesterday put out a description of a vehicle. They said they want to speak to the occupant or occupants of this vehicle. It was a white Hyundai Elantra between the years of 2011 and 2013. So this is really, Joseph, and I'll start with you on this one, the most specific information the police have asked for throughout the course of this investigation. So what do you make of them asking to speak with the occupant or occupants of this vehicle? This vehicle was apparently seen in the area of the King Road home where the 4 students were murdered.
Time. That's the most important thing here. That I think that this goes back to a time signature. Somehow, some way, they captured this vehicle in, I don't know in what format necessarily, but they are interested in seeing these individuals that occupied this vehicle, that were operating this vehicle, because they may have seen something. I don't know if they're thinking that this might be a suspect, but certainly it's the biggest lead, I think, from the perspective of specificity, isn't it? You know, I don't know about you guys, but yesterday when this dropped, I automatically retweeted this out, you know, and said that this is breaking news. This is something, because, you know, we haven't heard very much relative to specific information. This was, in fact, the most specific thing that they had offered up. So was it passing by the location at that particular time? Did they get a description on the individuals that were in the vehicle? Is there some connection to that vehicle and the location of these homicides?
Yeah, I was very interested when I saw this, and frankly quite stunned, because it is so specific. Imran, you're a lawyer. You defend clients all of the time. If you have somebody coming to you and they say, hey, that was my vehicle, what is your next step from there?
Yeah, Anjanette, I'm also a former prosecutor, so those first leads that the detectives that I used to work with would take were very critical. And of course, there would be times where law enforcement are going to follow those leads, especially in a case like this, where all eyes are on it, for one thing, but there's also a real need for answers because these young lives have been lost. But you're going to follow these leads. And, you know, if someone comes forward and says, okay, well, this was my vehicle, you know, law enforcement are going to want to talk to that individual, really get a timeline from them, and exclude them early on if it's not going to be a suspect. Because for each passing minute, and Joseph will also speak to this in his experience, evidence could be lost. Evidence could degrade. Witnesses could be, you know, lost in the woodwork. So each moment in these early hours and these days, and, you know, time is passing, is critical as they investigate these deaths.
Most certainly, and that was my thought. And we don't know, the investigators have not said whether they believe this was somebody involved or whether they might simply be a witness. They just said they believe this person or persons in the vehicle may have information critical to the case. And when you use language like that, Joseph, it really got my antennas up. I thought to myself, my goodness, because you probably don't see a lot of vehicles on King Road at that time of the evening. So if we are talking about a potential suspect here, more than 3 weeks has passed. So what could possibly be left in that vehicle?
Well, I think there's 2 ways to probably look at it. Are they looking to glean information from the individuals that occupied the vehicle, or does the vehicle itself contain physical evidence, you know, that might have some kind of linkage? And, you know, Imran was mentioning just a second ago, there is in fact a diminishment of biological evidence over a period of time. And so you want to get in there and capture it as soon as you possibly can. That's why the urgency about getting their hands, on this vehicle. Let's say, for instance, somebody had contact at the scene. They go to the vehicle, and you might find trace elements contained therein in that vehicle. And that vehicle has been, this little vessel, if you will, up and down the streets, has been traveling back and forth, perhaps, or just out of town, or whatever the case might be. So every moment that the police do not have their hands on it, that investigators and scientists don't have their hands on it, if there is evidence within that vehicle, it begins to diminish as we move further and further down our timeline.
And the photos we've been showing you on the screen, we want to let you know those are stock photos. That is not the vehicle, but it is similar. Hyundai Elantra, white in color, between the years of 2011 and 2013. They don't have a license plate for this, Imran, and we are right on the Washington state line in Idaho, but Washington state is very nearby. So as a former prosecutor, what steps can the FBI and the Moscow Police Department take to maybe start combing through vehicles of that year and color? Are you going through DMV records? What are you doing?
Yeah, Anjanette, I think exactly that. They're going to be using some sleuthing, if you will, and looking at records as to what vehicles may be registered in that area. But it's going to be possibly a needle in the haystack. Now, this area of the country, it's more rural, it's less populated, say, than a large urban area, and that will be helpful, at least, in trying to locate this vehicle. But this particular piece of evidence, if you will, is something that's transitory. That car could have been passing through. It could be miles and miles away. We don't know. And without identifying information such as a license plate or any registration or like that, it just frustrates the ability for law enforcement to correctly identify who and where this vehicle is and who may have been driving it.
Hey, Anjanette,
right.
I've got to tell you something.
Yes.
Hang on, let me tell you something real quick. I can tell you where they're going to go first. As a university professor, they're going to the security services at the university, and they're going to check through the records at that university and see who has a parking pass. It's generally like a parking sticker or maybe a hanger on the rearview mirror. Do they have any vehicles that match that description that can be tied back to individuals at the university? That's the thing about it's one of the really unique characteristics of this crime is that it's in a university town. So you've got this interesting environment where things can tie back to the population that's associated with the university. I think that's probably where they're going to start.
And that's probably exactly right. I mean, the university would have a log of people with parking passes. So a very good comment there. We want to turn now to our questions from our viewers and our listeners. The first one comes from Shania Wozniak. I hope I pronounced that properly. And it's posted on Facebook. And she asked, Joseph, I'll direct this first one to you. Why haven't they revisited that one person who was at the food truck kiosk downtown? I feel they've cleared everyone way too early in this investigation. So we believe that she's referring to the man in the hoodie at the food truck who was near Maddie and Kaylee right before they went home for the evening. So what's your thought on that, about them not revisiting that or going back to him? As far as we know, they said that they don't believe he's involved.
Yeah, that's the key. You said, as far as we know. We don't know what they've done. They know where to find him, though. And I would imagine along the way at some point in time, if they think that there is some kind of connection to these crimes, because we can't just call it a crime. It's multiple. We're talking about a multiple homicide, each individual victim. So with that said, they're going to go through this individual's social media. They're going to go through their phone records, perhaps, and see if there's any kind of connectivity with any of the direct connectivity with the victims, and also any of the peripherals that are associated with that. In addition to that, if they have any kind of unknown biological evidence at the scene, this individual will be first on the list to eliminate. And that's my big question here. Has this individual been eliminated from a biological standpoint relative to connectivity of any of the individuals or to the scene itself?
Mm-hmm. Imran, as a former prosecutor, talk to us a little bit about that process of ruling people not just in, but excluding them. It seems like a lot of times that's what investigators try to do. They try to rule people out. And if they can't rule them out, then they're not ruled out. They may be ruled in. So that process, maybe you're doing an initial interview, but you may go back and re-interview that person at a later date. So what's that process like of trying to eliminate people as far as they go as a possible suspect?
Sure. So an investigation like this, as we have been seeing, is dynamic. Certain information is gleaned, information is then digested by law enforcement. As a former prosecutor, I could tell you that I would ride along crime investigations with detectives, and I was able to see from a legal perspective how things were gleaned evidentiary-wise, and how you would now eliminate a suspect or suspects by sort of digesting and analyzing this evidence. And, we're not getting a lot of information in specifics from law enforcement here. That, I think, you get a sense that there is an active investigation, as we know, and I don't think they're ruling anyone out per se. I think that maybe they're talking to people, and maybe this individual in the hoodie, maybe at least for this moment, perhaps ruled out, but I don't think they're totally crossing anyone off this list as investigation continues and evidence is procured.
And Imran, I wanted to ask you about that as well. This whole, you just kind of alluded to it, ruling people out. So do you think it's been too quick that they've come out and said, well, we don't believe this person is involved at this point, or we don't believe that person is involved? Do you think they've made those statements too quickly, or they're just saying that because at this point they just don't have enough to say that they are?
Well, we've seen that historically happen. We've seen law enforcement, looking at someone as a suspect, and perhaps at that point they're ruled out, but later on further evidence implicates someone in the crime. I'm not necessarily saying that happens here, but it's a possibility. And are they ruling people out too quickly? Well, it's the job of law enforcement to narrow down an investigation like this, to focus on people who are suspects or maybe a suspect, or get evidence regarding these crimes. And if there is someone or something that they feel is not pertinent evidentiary-wise in terms of leading to probable cause for an arrest for these crimes, then I think it's prudent that they let that be known. But I think it's an active investigation, and all eyes are on the law enforcement in this very rural area. So we're going to be seeing them, I think, taking a very close look at everyone, ruling people out, but also not excluding possibilities.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Imran, thanks so much for that. And Joseph is still with us here as well. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more of your questions coming in on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Keep them coming. We're going to talk about the 911 call when we come back. For now, we're going to take a quick break. I'm Anjanette Levy, coming to you live from Moscow, Idaho, and you are watching Law and Crime. Welcome back to the Lunch Show here on Law and Crime. I'm Anjanette Levy, and we are coming to you live from Moscow, Idaho, where the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students is well underway. We are in the 3rd week, almost approaching the 4th week of this active criminal investigation. And there are still more questions than there are answers in this case, as far as the public is concerned. Police here in Moscow, Idaho are investigating. We're here at the Moscow Police Department. They are being assisted by Idaho State Police and the FBI. And we are taking your questions this hour, so please keep them coming on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. We will try to get to each and every one of them. And joining us now is Jennifer Koffendorfer. She is a former FBI agent, a retired FBI agent, and she has been following this case closely. Also with me is Joseph Scott Morgan and Imran Ansari. So Jennifer, thanks for coming on. My question to you is about that breaking news we've had about the vehicle that police are looking for, the Hyundai Elantra. It's between the years of 2011 and 2013. It seems like this is the most specific request for information we've received from the police throughout the course of this investigation. So how significant is it to you that they're asking to talk to the occupant or occupants of this white Hyundai Elantra that was in the area around the time of the murders?
Well, I think it's extremely significant. This is the first time, as you mentioned, that they've come forward. And I found that the precise language they used was very interesting. And that language was the occupants, not necessarily the owner. So they're looking for anybody who was in there that actually saw something at this time frame. That is how I took that. And law enforcement, this is a little gem, but it's going to take a lot of analytical work if somebody doesn't come forward. But they can do it. They have registration records pertaining to all these sorts of vehicles, this Hyundai Elantra, during this time frame. It's just going to take a lot of work, but it can be done.
Yeah, most certainly. And we'd love to know whether they think they're witnesses or a possible suspect. And that's really the big question on everyone's minds right now. We want to get to more of our viewers and listeners' questions. This one comes from Cecily Maya. She's posting this on YouTube. And she asks, why are the 2 surviving roommates cleared of involvement? Joseph, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. We were talking about this the last block, about people seemingly being excluded fairly quickly in this. So they're saying they don't believe the 2 surviving roommates, the 2 young women, are involved. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I grow weary of the term exclude at this point in time, considering how fresh this still is. I think that anybody and everybody is still potentially on the radar for the police, but you have to think about this from my perspective. I believe that these would have been 2 of the first people that would have been brought in for the police to have taken a statement from, because let's keep in mind, they could be placed there potentially during this event. So they would have wanted to have gotten to these 2 occupants of the residence downstairs first and chat with them and find out. And still, we don't know what their connection is to this, to this point, it's kind of a mysterious 9/11 call. How this was made, what their interaction was on that level. Did they have an awareness of it? So I think that certainly from that perspective, they would have gleaned as much information as they could from them about that night and the events leading up to the discovery of the bodies. And also, they're still going to have to factor into the calculus from a forensic standpoint relative to whatever biological evidence is at the scene. So we don't know what, exclude or eliminate means, relative to any kind of sample that they might offer up. Remember, these individuals occupied the same space as the victims, and that's going to be significant as well.
Most definitely, because it would be no surprise whatsoever to find the 2 surviving roommates' DNA in this house.
No.
But it's the location of that DNA that matters, Joseph. Really, where is their DNA found? If it's found in a mixture at the actual crime scene, then there's an issue.
Yeah, there is, and you begin to think about, we look for evidence-rich samples, and what I mean by that, when we're specifically talking about blood, We're talking about those items, those bits of DNA that we get from this evidence-rich source of blood or other, biological medium. Uh, we're not talking about touch DNA. That the dead skin cells that slough off that you hear about so much in the media now. You're going to find this stuff all through the house, but it's going to be commingled, the touch DNA, with everybody else that's passed through the house that it hasn't had a chance to diminish. Remember, they've identified this house as a gathering location. Okay. So
Hmm.
everybody that has been through there, anybody that's gone into the laboratory, anybody that's gone to the sink to wash their hands, to touch surfaces, all that stuff is going to be there. And that's one of the reasons that the scientific information that's coming from the scene is so very dense. And they're having to take their time to work through all of this.
And we have another question. This question is about the 911 call, and there's been a lot of questions about this because typically in investigations, not always, but a lot of times we get the 911 call fairly quickly. In this case, it has not been released. And Pamela Patterson Drakeford from Facebook is asking, can we verify the 911 call? It was mentioned someone had passed out. Was that the surviving roommate calling about the other surviving roommate? I didn't think there was any way they would look at one of the victims and think they passed out. There had to be a lot of blood. So, Jennifer, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Obviously, we don't know much about that 911 call. We knew that it was kind of logged in the system as a call for an unconscious person, but we don't know exactly whether they believe these people were passed out or how much blood was at the scene.
Well, I think that there is so much speculation about that call because we know it was made from one of the roommates' phones, but it's also been basically said that it wasn't a roommate that made it. So we know that there were other individuals that were on scene. So there's a lot of speculation. Did somebody pass out? Was somebody at an after party and then passed out? Were they referring to that? Did somebody walk in the room and see all this blood and the situation before them and pass out? So there's a lot of speculation, but I think what we do know from the fact that this has not been released is that it contains information that
Yep.
the law enforcement officials believe is very sensitive. So I would guess it would identify different individuals who were there, and it would identify a lot of interaction that took place during that call.
Most definitely. And I do want to update you guys on this because I had spoken with Aaron Snell of the Idaho State Police, who's acting as a public information officer on this case. And I asked him specifically about that 911 call when we spoke. Why hasn't it been released? And his feeling was that it could possibly be released, not immediately, but sometime in the near future. He said sooner rather than later. So we don't have a specific date for when that might come, but he thought maybe the investigators had some specific information in there that they wanted to protect, but he also thought that a 911 call could be released at some point in the near future, although he didn't give a specific date. Unfortunately, now we have to say goodbye to our friend Joseph Scott Morgan, but Imran is going to stay with us, as is Jennifer, and we will continue to take your questions throughout this hour. Joseph Scott Morgan, thanks so much for being on with us. As always, we always appreciate it. So we are going to take a quick break. Stay with us. You are watching The Lunch Show here on Law and Crime, coming to you live from Moscow, Idaho. Welcome to the Lunch Show here on Law and Crime. I'm Anjanette Levy, and I'm coming to you live from the police department in Moscow, Idaho. And this is where the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students is well underway. And we have new information for you from the Moscow Police Department. They are asking for specific information about a vehicle that was seen in the area of King Road. That is where the home is located, where these students were murdered nearly a month ago. This is a white Hyundai Elantra between the years of 2011 and 2013. It's similar to the vehicle seen in that photo. That's actually a stock image. But police said yesterday they want to speak to the owner, the occupant or the occupants of that vehicle because it was seen in that area around the time that these murders took place. We are taking your questions. Please keep them coming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, and we will get to as many of them as we can. With us this hour is Jennifer Koffendorfer. She is a former FBI agent, and Imran Ansari is a host here at Law and Crime and also an attorney. So thanks to both of you for being with us. Jennifer, this first question I'm going to pose to you, it comes from Cheryl Elder on Facebook, and she has asked, have the authorities cleared all other vehicles, and this is the only one that they cannot clear? So that is her question regarding the Hyundai Elantra that they've asked for information about.
Well, how law enforcement is looking at this is, first of all, they are canvassing the area in terms of all the individuals that lived in units and in housing that was anywhere near our subject house. And then they're also looking at vehicles. So I'm not going to say that all the vehicles are cleared, but clearly they believe this stood out because of the time of day or early morning it was there. And it's standing out because they don't have a vehicle license plate that they've been able to recover. So therefore, it's a mystery vehicle that was in and around the King Road area at this critical time.
Most definitely. And think about it. This was the early morning hours of November 13th. King Road is not a road that gets a lot of vehicular traffic. There's a lot of foot traffic from what the neighbors have been telling me. So, Jennifer, I'm thinking this would probably stand out if either someone saw this vehicle or it was captured on some type of security footage.
Absolutely. It seems from the information we know that there was actual information from an interview about this vehicle. And that makes it very interesting because whenever you get information from people and what they see, to have it be this focused as being Hyundai Elantra makes me think they perhaps corroborated the fact that what this individual saw actually came up on a camera view as well.
Interesting. And I think if there was some camera footage or video footage of this, we would all love to see it. Imran, this question comes to you from Eli Zaveda on YouTube. And he asks, the killer could have easily left Idaho. Shouldn't there be a nationwide alert to be on the lookout? So what are your thoughts on that as a former prosecutor?
Yeah, Anjanette, I think that we don't have enough information for any particular individual to be on the lookout for. I think we're really in an early stage of this investigation, even though weeks have passed now. And in many ways, just although it's not an official bulletin, you have so many eyes on what is going on in Moscow, Idaho, in terms of the investigation, that the nation is on alert. But what are you on the alert for? I don't think we have enough information of who or what to look out for. Now we have the description of this vehicle. You want to be careful before you issue a bulletin where the information is still vague and not specific, because you don't want people being vigilantes out there and suspecting someone when you don't have specific information. I think that law enforcement that are trying to narrow down their evidence, they're trying to get those leads. You have that with this vehicle and now the information about this vehicle as they search for it. But I think when they do have more specifics, you will see more of a concerted effort of law enforcement to get more eyes out there with perhaps a nationwide official bulletin. Could this individual have been left Idaho? Perhaps yes. Could this individual has left the country? Perhaps yes, because we don't have enough information on who may have done that and committed these heinous crimes at this time.
Yeah, and with a be on the lookout, usually it's pretty specific information about someone they are looking for, and then you get into a situation if that person doesn't turn themselves in, where you have a manhunt on your hands. So we aren't at that point yet. This next question, I'm going to give this one to you, Jennifer, comes from Debbie McLean. She posted this on YouTube, and she asks, did the coroner know the time of death to be accurate? So we've heard a range here. They believe that these homicides occurred, it sounds like, sometime after 3 a.m., but there can be a range of time. So do we know the time of death to be accurate?
I think the time of death has been determined accurate within particular parameters. And again, that would have been determined by the ME and be part of the autopsy. And I believe those autopsies have been concluded, possibly toxology results are still out, but I believe they have even started to come in at this point. So yes, I think that the specific time frame they have has been narrowed down based on lividity, based on what was in the stomach and how far it had been digested, and that the ME made an approximation, and that's why they have this time frame.
And I think that we also know the time frame to a degree, just because we know that those kids arrived home around 1:45. Kaylee and Maddie got home around 1:56. Ethan and Xana, we were told, 1:45. So it had to be sometime after 2 a.m. And then Kaylee's sister, of course, said that the last call from Kaylee's phone happened at 2:52, so it had to be sometime after that, as far as we know. Imran, this question I think is interesting for you. It's been since November 23rd that the police have provided an actual press conference with any type of updated information. Why do you think it's been such a long period of time, and now they're just doing kind of on-camera interviews when requested, not revealing a lot of information, and also posting updates on Facebook? Do you have any feeling as to why they haven't come out and done a formal press conference since November 23rd?
Well, Angela, I think that is because it's still a very dynamic investigation. And if there is a piece of information or evidence or that they feel need or warrant a formal press conference, I think we're going to be seeing that, because there's a lot of people out in the public who want to know what happened in that Idaho town to these individuals. But for now, I think that it's a piecemeal sort of drip of information. And you know better than I do, because you are the boots on the ground there for Law and Crime. But as that information is dripped out, I think it's indicative of the way the investigation is going here. They're getting leads and small bits of information at a time. But once there is a big movement, if you will, in terms of what they have, I think we'll see a more formal press conference for the public, because everyone wants to know.
Yeah, no doubt. And all eyes really are on Idaho. People are watching this from across the country and around the world. I actually met someone who ran into a reporter from London yesterday. So this is getting a lot of attention, international attention. This next question is for you, Jennifer, and it comes from LJ Sings on YouTube. And LJ asks, is it possible that authorities do have a suspect or suspects, but are keeping that information close to the vest as they continue to look at lab results? I was told yesterday they don't have a suspect or suspects, but is it possible they really do and they just aren't revealing that?
Unfortunately, I don't think they do. And that is the frustrating part. They're trying to narrow down. This is one of these cases that there's too much information. Sometimes it's difficult to solve a case because you just don't have enough clues. In this case, there is so much information to go through. The web of individuals connected to the victims, the DNA evidence, and that crime scene, which would be so difficult. It took them such a long time to even finish compiling and extracting all that information, all of the canvassing that had to be done, the video, the digital information. It is so much information, it's drawing out the amount of time. So the answer is no, I don't believe they have their suspect yet.
Interesting. And You mentioned the digital evidence, Jennifer. I know that can actually take some time to compile if you approach Facebook or one of these social media companies, and those records can be voluminous. I just covered a trial where they said they received 30,000 pages of records from Facebook. I mean, just going through that amount of information. Imran, what does it take to go through maybe 30,000 pages of information related to maybe these direct messages from a social media platform? I mean, that could take so much time when you have analysts combing through that.
No, absolutely. And, when you have that volume of information, you need to look at it. You don't want to miss any clues that may be in a Facebook post or some sort of computer forensic information that may be gleaned in social media. And it has to be looked at, especially when you're investigating the deaths of 4 individuals in a university community where people that age are posting things online. There's also security camera footage that has to be looked through. But it takes manpower to do so. And you're going to have everyone who is involved there, the FBI, the local law enforcement, and those helping out, really putting in the effort and time and effort to look through this. And you're going to have forensic analysis and technicians who are skilled at looking at computer analysis and video footage in order to really narrow things down here. And it's going to take time, effort, and, as Jennifer was talking about the volume of evidence, that is going to cause some delay because you have to look through it and you have to be careful when you're doing so. So I think that it's going to be a real taxing effort here on law enforcement in that area as they look at the electronic evidence or data that they're receiving, and also interviewing people and talking to people and doing that sort of old school sleuthing as they follow leads to try to solve this crime.
And it definitely will take some time. I mean, the FBI is here on the ground in Idaho, as is the Idaho State Police, of course, and the Moscow Police Department. They're a small department here. That's why they have them assisting. So it could really take some time. Next question for you, Jennifer, and this comes from A. Edmo from YouTube. A. Edmo asks, is there more information on the group of drunk students in the field in between the house and the frat house? This was some body camera footage that came to light that showed some young people. I won't say they're teenagers, but I believe they were underage and they were drunk and they were cited. Is there any more information on them and involvement with them? Do we know any more about this? And as far as I know, these were just some drunk kids out and about and they were cited. That's all I know about it. How about you, Jennifer?
That's all that's come out, but make no mistake, those younger individuals were interviewed. They're leaving no stone unturned, and they are interviewing anyone and everyone that could have possibly seen anything. And I think that's the frustrating part, right? This is boots on the ground. This is the type of investigation that you really need qualified and skilled interviewers. And they've been out doing their interviews, yet we don't have a clue as to a subject yet. And that's frustrating, of course, when here we are down the road all these weeks and we still really don't know much.
And we really don't know much. I mean, the investigators say that there's a picture coming together, but they're not really sharing with us what that picture looks like. So we are going to take a quick break. Keep your questions coming. We will get to each and every one of them if we can. Post them on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. I'm Anjanette Levy in Moscow, Idaho, and you are watching Law and Crime. Welcome back to the Lunch Show here on Law and Crime. I'm Anjanette Levy, coming to you live from Moscow, Idaho, where the investigation into the murder of 4 University of Idaho students seems to be heating up with a little bit of information about a vehicle that police are looking for, and they want to speak to the people who were in that vehicle that was in the area of the homicides on the morning they occurred. Of course, those 4 victims, Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, 4 young people, their lives snuffed out within minutes. And it's just a horrific, horrific crime that has rocked this small community. We are taking your questions, and we have been this whole hour. Please keep them coming on Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, and we will get to as many of them as possible and answer them to the best of our abilities. Jennifer Coffenduffer is a former FBI agent. She is here with us, along with Imran Ansari. He is a host here at Law and Crime and an attorney. I want to start this question with you, Jennifer, or toss this one to you. It comes from Miss Anonymous from YouTube, and she asks, have any leads investigated come from TikTok? What are your thoughts on that possibility?
Oh, I think definitely so. I can tell you my DM box is overloaded with information that's been conducted by different sleuths. And listen, they do amazing work. They're doing what the analysts aren't doing quite yet, or have just started doing within law enforcement, because they're waiting on subpoena returns and court order returns. But the cyber sleuths are in looking at all of the social media, and they have found some very interesting clues, things that are being said, definite pictures of this possible Elantra that they have found in the background even of Maddie in one picture. So they're finding great information, and those are being sent in, I can assure you, to the FBI and to the tip line so they can be further evaluated by law enforcement.
And they are collecting that information. The Moscow police has put that information out, that they are asking people to upload any digital evidence to the FBI's website. So that is a place where people can submit that information. We want to take this next question, and it comes from Allison from YouTube, or it might be Alacan. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. Did they interview peeps from the frat house? And let me tell you, I will answer that question. I'll take that one. Yes, they have. And I've spoken to people at the Sigma Chi house where Ethan was a member, and where Xana and Ethan attended the party that night at the Sigma Chi house on November 12th, just a short distance away from the house where the murders occurred. Ethan lived at the frat house, Xana at her home on King Road with Maddie and Kaylee, and those people have been interviewed, and we've been told by the president of Sigma Chi that they are cooperating with law enforcement and have told them everything they know. So that's what we've been told. Imran, this next question will go to you. Fernanda Volcanis from YouTube asks, with no break-in, dog trapped in one of the rooms, no footprints with blood outside the house, couldn't the killer be a friend who went to sleep together and did it without haste and fear? So that's a hypothetical here.
Yeah, Anjanette, no, listen, I think the fact that there was no forced entry and there's no sort of evidence, residual evidence of showing an entrance or exit that may be linked to the killings raises some questions. I think law enforcement most likely started with their investigations, let's say in the 4 corners of that house, and who was in that house at the time, and when they responded to the scene, the roommates, etc. There is that aspect of the house being a gathering point for college students and friends and whatnot that may complicate things, because the fact that there's no forced entry lends itself to an idea or a theory that this is someone who is familiar with one or all of the victims here. But, you know, I think law enforcement started in the closest proximity of where these bodies were found, and they've sort of expanded from that search. But it is very interesting that there's no forced entry, and there's no evidence of entering or exit regarding, you know, say, the bloody footprints or things like that. And I think law enforcement have looked at that, and they continue to look at what was in the 4 corners, if you will, of the house, and now beyond.
Interesting you bring that up about the entry point, because they're not commenting. I asked specifically Imran and Jennifer, how do you think this person got in the home? And they won't say. Everybody's been speculating about that sliding glass door at the back of the home that leads to the second floor. That seems likely, but we just don't know. It's one of those questions we'd all love to have answered. Jennifer, this next question is for you. It comes from Handsome Hensley on YouTube. Is it possible there may have been some type of altercation at the frat house, or maybe one of the frat members had an issue with them and followed them home? It seems that they must have had knowledge of the layout of the home. Was anybody at the frat interviewed? Well, we know they were, but your thoughts on this possibly being an altercation at the fraternity house and the party? Obviously, these are all just people, asking questions about things they're wondering. Your thoughts on that possibility?
Well, there's a huge hiatus of time between the time they were at the party and the time they returned home, seemingly, at least from the timeline that we have made available to us through law enforcement. So as far as we know, those gaps have not been filled yet. Was there an altercation? We don't know, because we're not privy to those interviews. I can tell you I've personally seen, though, different videos that have been sent to me at various times, certainly interesting verbiage between people at the Sigma Chi house and Maddie and others. So, they're going to be looking at all of this. Did anybody have an issue? But I think because here we are weeks out and we still don't have a prime suspect, we are at the furthest reaches of the web that are on the peripheral of these individuals, meaning they are not the most obvious suspects, seemingly, or else we would probably have that suspect named by now.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. Just briefly, Imran, we don't have a lot of time left, but as a former prosecutor, how involved would the actual prosecutors be in this case? Because obviously the law enforcement does the investigation, but the prosecutor has to win the case should it ever go to trial or be prosecuted. So we know that the prosecutor hasn't really said much since an interview about a week ago, but briefly, how involved do you think he is in the inner workings of this investigation?
Sure. So, Anjanette, that's a great question, because, ultimately the ammo that the district attorney's office or the prosecutor's office there will have to use against the individual, if they are ever found, is what is gleaned from the investigation by law enforcement. It's very important. And I think that in the background, they are riding along, if you will, with this case and making sure that any evidence is preserved correctly for the use at trial, if that day ever comes.
Yeah, definitely. And that is what they're working toward here. The police say that they're keeping things close to the vest because they don't want to compromise the investigation or a future prosecution. And they've said that very plainly, even though it's frustrating not only the families and members of the public. Imran, thanks so much for letting me hop on here. I'm going to turn it back over to you. Jennifer Coffendorfer, thank you as well for joining us for this hour. And thank you as well. We'll have much more for you later. Until then, have a good afternoon. Imran will be right back.